Hello and welcome to Winning Paths podcast, your guide through the exhilarating world of archery. Whether you're a seasoned archer or just dipping your toes into the sport, this podcast is your go-to resource for everything archery related. Our podcast is a bi-weekly rendezvous, with fresh episodes dropping every Sunday. We are thrilled to take you on a journey exploring the rich tapestry of archery, from its storied past to the cutting-edge present, and even glimpses into its exciting future. Winning Paths isn't just about the sport, it's a celebration of the passion and dedication that fuels the archery community. Join us for riveting monologues and insightful interviews, covering a spectrum of archery topics. From the historical roots that anchor our beloved sport to in-depth equipment reviews, we've got it all. Expect fascinating tidbits, little-known facts, and explorations of archery's role in historical and sociological contexts. In essence, it's your one-stop shop for all things archery and beyond. Your participation is crucial to the heartbeat of Winning Paths. If you have suggestions, insights, or a burning desire to share your own archery journey, we want to hear from you. Connect with us at tfm.news and become a part of shaping the podcast's future. At Winning Paths, we're on a mission to continually enhance your listening experience. We value your feedback and are dedicated to delivering maximum value to our community of archery enthusiasts. So, buckle up, stay tuned, and immerse yourself in the world of Winning Paths, where the pursuit of excellence in archery knows no bounds.
Salutations, esteemed listeners, and a warm return to the entrancing melodies of Winning Paths. I am Marcin Malik, your companion on this expedition through the annals of time. Today, our narrative unfolds in the year 1356, in the vicinity of Poitiers, where, once again, the French and the English find themselves entwined in the dance of the life and death. This marks yet another episode, an intricate tale woven into the fabric of our ongoing Unstrung Virtue podcast series, unraveling the complexities of the 100 Years' War and the profound role enacted by archers. Without further ado, let us transcend the constraints of the present and journey back to medieval France. Envision the fields of Poitiers, where the soil bears witness to the saga of bravery, as the blood of valiant knights saturates the very essence of the prolonged war of medieval powers. The Battle of Poitiers in 1356 unfolded as a poignant chapter in the early stages of the 100 Years' War, a dramatic sequel to the resounding English triumph at the Battle of Crécy a decade prior. Once again, the English basked in the sweet taste of victory, while the French, forsaken by their own monarch, found themselves adrift in the tempest of chaotic years that followed. This clash on the hallowed grounds of Poitiers resonated as the second act of a storied conflict. In that earlier era, it witnessed the collision between the Arab Umayyad state and the valiant forces led by Charles Martel, a precursor to the grand stage where the mid-14th century Battle of Poitiers unfolded, a pinnacle in the prolonged struggle between France and England. In the unfolding tableau of history, the year 1328 unfurled a succession crisis upon the demise of the French king, Charles IV. Philip of Valois ascended to the throne as Philip VI, yet Edward III of England defiantly laid claim to the French crown. His challenge, though, met vehement resistance on French soil, adhering to the tenets of Salic law that asserted the male line as the sole conduit of kingship. The refusal of Edward III, the sovereign of England, and concurrently the Duke of Aquitaine, to submit to the feudal customs of the French court, triggered the incursion of Philip VI in 1337, leading to the confiscation of the English duke's domain. Thus commenced the 100 Years' War, a tempestuous saga of conflict and resolution that persisted for more than a century. In the subsequent years, Edward III orchestrated a series of strategic forays into the heartland of French territories. Each venture met with the same poignant outcome: French defeat. The resonating echoes of the Battle of Crécy paved the triumphant path for Edward to claim Calais as his own. Against this backdrop of geopolitical turmoil, Europe was ensnared in the sinister clutches of the Black Death, a cataclysmic plague that left in its wake a swath of desolation. Some regions of Western Europe bore witness to the staggering loss of 30 to 50% of their population. the harrowing toll of mortality, sparing not even the opulent abodes and royal courts, momentarily pressed pause on the theatre of war. In 1350, the last breath of King Philip VI marked a poignant moment. His son, John II, called the Good, assuming the mantle of rule. By the eve of 1355, Edward III, a master strategist in the theatre of war, had mapped out the contours of yet another grand campaign into French territories. His scion, Edward of Woodstock, the Black Prince, alighted upon the shores of Bordeaux, leading a resplendent force on a majestic odyssey through the sun-soaked landscapes of southern France to the gates of Carcassonne. Though thwarted in the capture of that impregnable fortress, the Black Prince, undeterred, embarked on a triumphant march through the quaint hamlets and towns that lay in his path. In this space I shall weave a brief ode to the enigmatic Black Prince, a figure of profound fascination, not solely from the historical lens, but, enchantingly, a timeless fount of inspiration for writers and poets alike, enduring the passage of more than 6.5 centuries. Edward of Woodstock, forever etched in the annals of history as the Black Prince, emerged as the primogeniture and heir apparent to the English throne, a patrimony held by his father, King Edward III. His demise preceding that of his father led to the ascension of his son, Richard II, to the regal mantle. Despite the shadow of a premature departure, Edward carved an indelible legacy as one of the most accomplished English commanders during the tumultuous epochs of the 100 Years' War. Revered by his English contemporaries, he stood as an embodiment of chivalry, earning accolades as one of the preeminent knights of his era. Bestowed with the historic title of Duke of Cornwall in 1337, Edward became the inaugural English Duke, a testament to his royal lineage. In his father's absence, he assumed the mantle of the kingdom's guardian in 1313-38, 1340, and 1342. The accolades continued to amass as he ascended to the position of Prince of Wales in 1343, a moment sanctified by his father's knighting at La Hougue in 1346. In the pivotal year of 1346, Prince Edward commanded the vanguard at the Battle of Crécy, a battleground where his father intentionally entrusted him with the mantle of victory. His military endeavours extended to Edward III's in 1349 Calais expedition, marking a relentless pursuit of glory. A year later, in 1355, he assumed the role of the king's lieutenant in Gascony, leading an army on a chevauchée that left an indelible mark on the landscapes of Aquitaine. Avignon and Castelnaudary bore witness to his pillaging, Carcassonne crumbled under his siege, and Narbonne succumbed to his plunder. The subsequent year witnessed another chevauchée, as Edward ravaged Auvergne, Limousin, and Berry, albeit failing to seize Bourges. A momentous encounter materialized in the form of the Battle of Poitiers, where his forces routed the French and ensnared King John in the clutches of captivity. Post-Poitiers, Edward returned to the English realm in 1360, negotiating the Treaty of Bretigny, a testament to his diplomatic acumen. Crowned Prince of Aquitaine and Gascony in 1362, his suzerainty faced challenges from Gascon nobles, including the obstinate Lord of Albret. The spectre of marauding English and Gascon free companies prompted Edward, at his father's behest in 1364, to quell their raids. Engaging in strategic alliances, he secured a passage through Navarre in 1366, sealing the covenant by obtaining a mortgage on Castro Urdiales and the province of Biscay from Kings Peter of Castile and Charles II of Navarre. Yet defiance echoed in 1367 as Henry of Trastamara, Peter's half-brother, challenged Edward's might. The ensuing Battle of Nájera, after months of anticipation, culminated in Edward's triumph over Henry. A return to Aquitaine in quest of territorial gains proved intricate, with Prince Edward's imposition of a hearth tax in 1368 estranging the nobility, particularly the Lord of Albret. A homecoming transpired in 1371, heralding Edward's relinquishment of the Principality of Aquitaine and Gascony the following year. leading the Commons in a fervent assault against the Lancastrian administration in 1376, Edward succumbed to the ravages of dysentery later that year. His final repose lies in the hallowed halls of Canterbury Cathedral, where his surcoat, helmet, shield, and gauntlets endure as relics of a bygone era. Past the spindle of history, and the 19th day of September, in the year 1356, the English host found itself in solemn opposition to the forces of France near the enchanting plains of Poitiers in the realm of Aquitaine. At the helm of the English forces stood none other than the Black Prince, commanding a legion of approximately 6,000 valiant souls. Much akin to the preceding engagement at Crécy, the might of the English army rested upon the formidable archers, wielding their elongated yew-bows with a prowess that bespoke their mastery. Opposing them, leading the formidable French host, was none other than King John II, his forces estimated to number around 11,000. In the prelude to the impending battle, a local prelate, Cardinal Élie de Talleyrand-Périgord, endeavoured to weave the threads of peace between the embattled adversaries. Proposals, even as audacious as resolving the conflict through 100 on a side, were tendered. God shall favour us if we sidestep a conflict wherein so many gallant lives might be extinguished, voices implored. Alas, all entreaties were met with adamant rejection from both factions, and so the theatre of war unfurled itself upon the storied grounds of Poitiers. The dance of destiny commenced, swaying with an ebb and flow as capricious as the fates. In moments it appeared as if the French, with resolute vigour, might breach the formidable English advance, only to be repulsed once more by the steadfast archers. Then, the forces personally marshalled by the noble John the Good joined the fray. Yet, against the tide, the English clung to the upper hand. The French, ensnared in a tightening web, witnessed chaos reigning on the field. No necessity arises to chronicle the entire tumult of the battle, for an abundance of materials on the subject already exists. Furthermore, in the subsequent narrative, we shall delve into source texts of profound intrigue, crafted by those who existed in that era or stood as first-hand witnesses to its events. Our focus shall henceforth narrow to the pivotal juncture, a luminary instance that orchestrated the descent of King John the Good into the abyss of English captivity. King John and his venerable commanders found themselves in receipt of distressing tidings. The Black Prince's standard had vanished beyond the crest of the hill. A murmur of speculation rippled through the ranks of the French leadership, conjecturing that the adversary was in precipitous retreat, demanding swift action to ensnare them before escape could be effected. The sagacious counsel of Marshal Clermont and Lord Douglas, however, espoused maintaining the current position. They posited that Prince Edward's forces, beset by scarcity, would inevitably capitulate if the French bided their time with patience. Amidst this deliberation, Audrehem, a fervent challenger of Clermont's honour, ardently urged King John to launch an immediate assault. His fervour went so far as to declare his personal intent to charge the enemy, undeterred. In the face of such impetuous insistence, Clermont, albeit reluctantly, acceded to participate in the forthcoming offensive. As the advance guard of the French army commenced their mounted assault, echoing the tactics of their forebears at Crécy, King John commanded the men-at-arms in the subsequent vast divisions to fight on foot. Alas, the French, bereft of the peerless generalship and unyielding resolve of their English counterparts, found themselves at a disadvantage. At the onset of the mid-morning engagement, Audrehem steered his company towards the positions held by the Earls of Warwick and Oxford. In their wake, the dismounted men-at-arms, under the command of the Constable of France and Lord Douglas, advanced with purpose. Following suit, Clermont initiated his assault. Due to Audrehem's relative distance from the English, both French mounted companies collided with the English forces simultaneously. As the noble cavaliers thundered across the expanse between the armies, the English archers on both flanks unleashed their volleys. To their chagrin, the plated armour adorning the French knights and their steeds thwarted the efficacy of the arrows. The clamour of battle reached the ears of Warwick, prompting his timely return. During his absence, Oxford astutely directed his archers to advance, leveraging the marshy terrain as a natural bulwark, positioning themselves to unleash volleys into the exposed flanks and rear of the war mounts. This stratagem proved efficacious, causing horses to stumble as arrows found their mark. The ensuing chaos, whether riderless or not, disrupted the dismounted French men-at-arms following the mounted charge. Despite these trials, the forces under Lord Douglas and the Constable of France persevered, ultimately reaching the hedgerow in their determined advance. Despite the brevity of the distance between Clermont's force and Salisbury's defensive line, the former found himself compelled to eschew a direct route. Negotiating a labyrinthine terrain of vineyards and thorn-laden thickets, his men were compelled to condense their assault front upon reaching the hallowed gap in the hedgerow. A handful of audacious attackers managed to breach the formidable English position, prompting the belated arrival of supporting crossbowmen seeking to unleash suppressing volleys. Swift and resolute, Salisbury orchestrated a counterattack, dispatching his troops to eviscerate the French men-at-arms ensconced within the English perimeter, forcefully repelling the incursion. Simultaneously, Audreham's assault unfolded, a symphony of futility. The French vanguard, sacrificial in its endeavor, yielded ghastly casualties in exchange for meager gains, a few sporadic breaches in the English line for the imminent arrival of the succeeding French division. On the blood-soaked canvas of the battlefield, the lifeless forms of Marshal Clermont and Constable de Brienne bore witness to the cruel toll exacted by war. Though a wounded Lord Douglas managed a precarious escape, the relentless jaws of English captivity ensnared Marshal Audreham. The dispirited remnants of the French vanguard retraced their path as the 2nd Division advanced, heralding the demise of any hope for a concerted assault. The collision of vanguard elements with a segment of the Dauphin's division thwarted cohesive action. The vanquished vanguard, locked in desperate struggle at the hedgerow, failed to realize the broader defeat unfolding around them. Undeterred by the setbacks, the Dauphin directed his assault squarely at the English defences adjacent to Prince Edward's sector, navigating an open field under the relentless hail of arrows before ascending a slope adorned with vines and thorny thickets. The macabre dance of death at Poitiers stretched its ghastly choreography across nearly 4 hours, a duration eclipsing the norm for battles of the period. The Dauphin's division and their Anglo-Gascon adversaries clashed unrelentingly for 2 hours, a brutal contest where no quarter was sought nor given. Swords met shields, casualties mounted, and French men-at-arms carved their way through hedgerows or exploited minor gaps. In a fleeting moment of triumph, the French breached the Anglo-Gascon defence, yet Edward, resolute in his strategy, refrained from unleashing his reserved forces. Amidst the tumult, the Earls of Salisbury and Suffolk, stalwart leaders, manoeuvred among their ranks, guiding archers into strategic positions and uplifting the sagging morale of their beleaguered troops. Their concerted efforts drove back the French onslaught. In this tumultuous phase of the conflict, the Duc de Bourbon met his end, a casualty of the relentless ebb and flow of battle. Meanwhile, the vigilant guardians of the Dauphin, sensing the encroaching peril, swiftly extricated him from the cauldron of combat. His brothers, Louis and John, were ushered away in the direction of Chauvigny, seeking refuge from the maelstrom that enveloped the field. In a mysterious turn of events, the Duc d'Orléans elected to withdraw to Chauvigny, leaving behind an enigmatic veil shrouding the reasons behind this retreat. He professed obedience to the king's orders as his justification, a proclamation met with skepticism by the discerning few. Of his 3,200-strong contingent, almost half opted to follow him, their allegiance tethered to a dubious directive. A meager faction persisted in their advance, endeavoring in a feeble assault promptly repulsed. Those who refrained from following the Duc d'Orléans or engaging in the attack seamlessly assimilated into the king's division. Seizing the brief respite afforded by this lull in the tempest of battle, Edward's weary troops seized the opportunity to rest, transporting their wounded to the rear and scouring the battlefield for service-able French weapons and arrows. Confronted with the impending necessity of countering King John's forthcoming assault, Edward orchestrated the consolidation of his forces into a formidable, cohesive entity. Additionally, he entrusted the task to Captal de Buch, charging him with assembling a detachment of 60 mounted knights and 100 mounted archers, circumnavigating the French flank and executing a decisive attack from the rear. As the clock approached midday, King John issued the command for his division to press forward, augmented by survivors from the initial 2 assaults and reinforcements from his brother's division. The force burgeoned to a formidable 4,000 men-at-arms accompanied by 300 crossbowmen. John directed Charny to elevate France's revered banner, the Crimson Oriflamme, as a harbinger of impending conflict. Simultaneously, stringent orders echoed forth from the French ranks, decreeing an ominous directive: no prisoners were to be taken. Behind a formidable shield wall, the French advanced, accompanied by the relentless volleys of Genoese crossbowmen. Faced with the scarcity of arrows, the English archers found their ability to retaliate constrained, meticulously conserving their remaining ammunition. The appearance of a 4th French assault force, bedecked with the unfurled oriflamme, cast a pall of despair over the beleaguered Anglo-Gascon soldiers. This gloom deepened upon the spectacle of Captal de Buch and his retinue riding away, their flanking tactic unbeknownst to all. Observing the erosion of his men's confidence, Prince Edward issued the imperative for an advance to confront the French onslaught. The potency of the ensuing English counter-attack lay in the resolute reserve of 400 men-at-arms. Simultaneously, the mounted force led by Captal de Buch navigated the river Meurson at the Gué de l'Homme, subsequently recrossing at the Gué de Rousson ford. Concealed by a strategic elevation, the strike force stealthily positioned itself behind the unsuspecting French king. A signal bearing the St. George standard fluttered aloft for Edward's discerning eyes. At that moment, Captal de Buch spurred his men into action, hurtling them into an unsuspecting French host. Meanwhile, Prince Edward's command echoed forth for a frontal advance. Salisbury's troops collided headlong with King John's forces, while Warwick's men assailed the French right flank. Depleted of their arrows, the English archers exchanged bows for swords, axes, and clubs, immersing themselves in the visceral melee that ensued. Despite housing the cream of France's knighthood, the 4th French Division succumbed to the jarring impact of an unforeseen charge into their rear, shattering their morale and unity. In stark contrast to the protracted struggle during Dauphin Charles' engagement, this phase of the battle unfolded with remarkable celerity. A multitude of Frenchmen, gripped by panic, sought refuge either by attempting to cross the Meurson or by embarking on a 5-mile sprint towards Poitiers. The relentless English pursuit pressed on, hounding the retreating French to the very gates of the city. However, met with a stony-faced refusal from the townsfolk, the English found themselves compelled to breach the gates, unleashing a brutal onslaught upon the beleaguered French men-at-arms. Within this grim tableau, a resolute pocket of French troops clung tenaciously to their ground. Pushed into a loop of the Meurson, later christened the Champ d'Alexandre, these valiant remnants found solace in the protective shield of the Order of the Star, defending their noble brethren. The momentous fall of the Oriflamme, its standard-bearer felled, resonated on both sides. King John, wielding his battle-axe with lethal efficacy, outmatched those who dared engage him in single combat, their identities veiled in the fog of war. The revelation of the French king's presence came to light only when Denis de Montbec, amidst the tumult, discerned his adversary's true identity and orchestrated the negotiation of King John's surrender. With the monarch in captivity, the threads of the battle inexorably wove towards an end. Chronicler John Froissart, in sobering reflection, penned, "Never before had there been so disastrous a rout in the annals of French defeat. The Black Prince, come evening, shared a repast with the French king in his tent, the setting sun casting long shadows upon the remnants of the battlefield. The Anglo-Gascon forces maintained their vigil in the vicinity until September 22nd. A mere 10 days later, the Black Prince's triumphant army traversed the terrain back to Gascony, accompanied by their captives and a trove of spoils. The toll of the clash weighed heavily on the French, with 2,500 meeting their demise and 2,600 finding themselves shackled in captivity, juxtaposed against a more modest toll of 1,000 English killed. The roster of the fallen included illustrious names such as the Duc de Bourbon, the Constable of France, and Marshal Clermont. Among the 42 French nobles captured were not only King John but also Prince Philippe and Marshal Audrehem. In recognition of his pivotal role in capturing the French monarch, Maubec received a lifelong pension from King Edward III, cementing his place in the annals of this historic encounter. Thus, the Battle of Poitiers reached its denouement, a resonant triumph for England and an unmitigated defeat for France. The realm of France, cast into the maelstrom of chaos, struggled to convalesce. Still nursing the wounds from the aftermath of Crécy, the very epitome of French chivalry, now met its demise on the fields where the English prevailed. The French Dauphin, the rightful heir to the throne, Charles, scion of John the Good, now found himself entangled in a tapestry of rebellion coursing through the kingdom, later dubbed the Jacquerie. Jean Froissart, chronicler of the age, intimated that post-Poitiers, the reins of authority effectively slipped into the grasp of the nobility, wielding their influence with a brutal hand, suppressing the murmurs of the peasantry. Edward III, the sovereign of England, endeavoured further incursions into the folds of French territories. Alas, his campaigns, bereft of the earlier lustre, faltered and stumbled. Reims, the sacred ground where French monarchs received their coronation, eluding his grasp. Eventually, a missive of peace from Dauphin Charles reached the English king's ear, and assent was given. In the year 1360, the Treaty of Bretigny unfolded its parchment. Edward III relinquished his claims to the French throne in exchange for unbridled dominion over Aquitaine and Calais, the ransom for the liberation of the captive king, inscribed in the annals of wealth, stood at a princely sum of 3 million gold crowns. John the Good was granted his freedom and embarked on a return to the heart of France, where the task awaited him to amass the agreed-upon ransom. Alas, the elusive coffers of fortune eluded his grasp, compelling him to, with a sense of volition, make the journey back across the Channel to England. A decision met with widespread censure, casting a shadow upon the king, branding him as either a fool, a madman, or a traitor. Perhaps John II had simply forfeited all inclination to wield the reins of governance over his realm. In the foreign land of England, though ostensibly bound by the chains of captivity, he led a life of tranquility and opulence within the confines of a castle, a sovereign in exile, free to traverse the realms and squander vast fortunes on his indulgences. The year 1364 witnessed the quiet departure of John II, his mortal remains retracing the journey back to the soil of France, finding eternal repose within the sacred walls of the French Basilica of Saint-Denis. The mantle of John's legacy fell upon his progeny, his son, who ascended to the throne bearing the regal name of Charles V. Jean Froissart's chronicles, of whom I expounded more extensively in the course of dissecting the Battle of Crécy, are a valuable primary source for understanding the events of the 100 Years' War, providing a detailed and vivid account of various battles. Here are some excerpts from Froissart's chronicles that pertain to the Battle of Poitiers.
The Prince of Wales made no long abode in Cognac, but departed and rode so long by easy journeys that he came to the city of Poitiers. There he lodged, and tarried for all his company to come thither, which they did by that night, and the next day by noon they were all come thither. The Englishmen knew well how to order themselves in the field of battle, for they were all men of one nation and of one language, and they were all on horseback. The prince divided his company into 3 battles. There was done many a feat of arms, and many a man cast to the earth. There were some slain and left dead on the field. But the prince his eldest son, the Lord James Audley, and the Lord John Chandos, who was there, made a knight. And divers other knights and squires did marvels in arms. The first battle was sore foughten and lasted long, but at last the Frenchmen were so strong and so mighty that they made the Englishmen recoil back. The archers stood in the manner of a hearse and shot wholly together. Their arrows were so frequent and so thick that it seemed snow. When the French king saw the shot of the archers, he said to his lords, Sirs, what need have we to be so greatly charged with these archers? Sirs, take heed to yourselves, for if they come to handstrokes, we shall be too few. The Duke of Orleans fought valiantly in the press and did marvels in arms, but he could not endure against the prince's battle and the Earl of Warwick's. Whoever fought against him and by fine force took him, and so led him out of the field. And in like manner the Earl of Suffolk and Sir Louis Bourdon took the Earl of Joigny. And so the battle endured all that day, and many a noble feat of arms was done that was not well known. There was slain the Lord James of Bourbon, nephew to the French king. He was slain by the hands of a squire of Gascony, called a bastard son to the Lord Arnold d'Andreghen. The king was a valiant knight and royally defended himself. He had about him, when he was taken, Sir Arnold d'Andreghen, his son the Lord Philip, the Lord James of Bourbon, the Lord John d'Artois, the Lord Charles Artois, and divers other. The prince made the French king alight down from his horse, and to unarm himself, and to sit down on a little molehill that was in the field, and there he made him a little to eat and drink. The Englishmen, seeing they had the field, took no heed to follow after their enemies, some because they were weary, some because they would not leave their winning, and others for that they had not all so much as they would have. And at night the prince caused a supper to be made in his lodging to the French king, and to the most part of the great lords that were prisoners. The prince sat at supper by the French king, and made him as good cheer as he could, and said, Sir, be of good comfort, for you shall be as safely kept with me as ever you were with any of your own people. The same day at night the prince made a supper in his lodging to the French king, and to the king his father-in-law, and to the most part of the great lords that were prisoners. And always the prince served before the king, as humbly as he could, and would not sit at the table for any desire that the king could make, but kneeled always before the king. The next morning by times the prince made all his prisoners to be set in array on foot in the same place where the battle had been before. Then he said to the French king, Sir, I deliver you to yourself, to do by yourself as you best please.
Jean le Bel, another medieval chronicler, also provides an account of the Battle of Poitiers in his work, Chronicles, Chronique. Although Jean le Bel's narrative may differ in certain details from Froissart's, both chronicles contribute to our understanding of this historical event. Gilles le Béal d'Echange, progenitor of Jean le Bel, held the esteemed position of alderman in the vibrant city of Liège. Steering his course into ecclesiastical realms, Jean embraced the sanctity of the church and ascended to the esteemed position of canon within the hallowed halls of the cathedral. Yet destiny weaved a different tapestry for him and his brother Henri, as they, lured by the charismatic Jean de Beaumont, ventured across the English Channel in 1327. Amidst the border skirmishes against the Scots, they etched their names into the annals of border warfare. Jean's testament, scripted in 1369, bears witness to the waning days of a life colored by historical turbulence, marking his final departure in 1370. Veiled in historical obscurity, his narrative is shrouded in the elegant prose of Jacques de Hemricourt, author of the Miroir des Nobles de Hesbaye. Hemricourt's tribute extols Jean's character and paints a vivid tableau of opulence, adorned in resplendent attire, surrounded by a retinue befitting his station, and a hospitality that echoed through the corridors of time. According to Hemricourt, the chronicler breathed his last at the venerable age of 80 or beyond. In the literary arena, John stands as a trailblazer, forsaking the conventional Latin for the more mellifluous French. A companion to Jean, Count de Beaumont, he traversed the landscapes of England and Scotland in the year 1327. Commissioned by the Duke himself, he penned the Vraies Chroniques, True Chronicles, a narrative that etched the tapestry of events during the reign of Edward III. Notably, Jean is credited as one of the pioneers in the use of interviews to verify and augment his factual narrative. The motivation behind Jean's quill lay in the desire to supplant a misleading rhymed chronicle of the wars of Edward III with an authentic account of his exploits leading up to the inception of the 100 Years' War. Froissart, a subsequent chronicler, acknowledged Jean's influence and integrated excerpts of Lebel's own text verbatim into his chronicles, solidifying Jean's role in the literary tapestry of the time. Although Lebel's chronicle lingered in obscurity, a solitary manuscript brought it to light, with fragments discovered in Jean d'Outremeuse's Les Mireurs des Histoires in 1847. The complete chronicle, resting in the library of Chalon-sur-Marne, was unveiled to the world by L. Paulain in 1863. Lebel's stylistic prowess has earned him comparisons with Froissart. His narrative integrity stands out, demanding first-hand witness accounts before etching events onto the vellum of history. However, this meticulousness is counterbalanced by his narrative limitations. Unlike broader historical perspectives, Lebel's focus remains on the exploits of chivalric heroes, eclipsing the overarching campaign narratives. Froissart, indebted to Lebel, borrowed some of his seminal episodes, such as the demise of Robert the Bruce, the intricate entanglement of Edward III and the Countess of Salisbury, and the devotion of the burghers of Calais. Alas, the elusive songs and virelais, testaments to his lyrical mastery, continue to evade the modern gaze, cloaked in the veils of time. Here, to observe the principle of diversification of sources, a few excerpts from Jean Lebel's chronicles on the Second Battle of Poitiers.
When the prince and his army arrived at the suburbs of Poitiers, they pitched their tents there. The prince, the Earl of Warwick, and all the other great men of the army were lodged in the town. Their army was so great that it seemed, and indeed was, marvellous. The English had drawn up in 3 battalions, each of them being an archer and a man-at-arms. These 3 battalions were a bowshot from each other. The King of France, having encamped and refreshed his men, who were all that day at ease, drew up in 3 large battalions to meet the enemy. They came on, the English beginning to fight, shouting, "St. George, St. George," and the French shouting, "St. Denis, St. Denis." The archers opened a path for the men-at-arms, who made a most excellent charge on the enemy. They shattered the first line and, in the space of 2 lance thrusts, broke up the second. When the king was taken prisoner, the French were routed on all sides. The Earl of Warwick, who had 3 horses killed under him that day, pursued the French the whole length of the field.
In this instance, within the confines of the annotation, one must delve into the particulars surrounding the apprehension of King John, for they bear not only significance, but also embody the quintessence of the French sovereigns and aristocracy's comportment during the tumultuous era of the 100 Years' War, a demeanour that invariably heralded woeful repercussions. Emboldened by the certainty of triumph, King John poised on the brink of victory, his formidable army dwarfing that of his adversary. Instead of precipitating an immediate clash, he chose the path of patience. In the pregnant silence that ensued, the papal legate weaved through the opposing camps, endeavouring to carve a path to conciliation between the leaders. Controversy swirled around the Black Prince's inclination for battle. His gestures, laden with the spoils of a laden wagon train, hinted at a reluctance to plunge into the fray. Promises of a 7-year truce and the potential restoration of Calais to the French crown spilled forth. John, however, countered with a demand as audacious as it was confrontational: the surrender of 100 of the prince's elite knights, including the prince himself, as living pledges. The negotiation, a tenuous dance at the precipice, found no harmonious resolution. As the delicate threads of diplomacy frayed, the symphony of war crescendoed. The day of reckoning dawned, a spectacle of deception orchestrated by John and his 17 knights, all clad in identical armour, a stratagem conceived to bewilder the enemy, whose singular objective was to ensnare the sovereign in the maelstrom of conflict. Despite these Machiavellian manoeuvres, the French cavalry, a juggernaut of armoured might, met its nemesis in the relentless onslaught of English longbow volleys. Amidst the chaos, King John wielded a battle-axe with valour, his helmet dislodged in the ferocious melee. Surrounded, he fought tenaciously until Denis de Mourbec, a French exile aligned with the English cause, approached.
"Sire, I am a knight of Artois. Yield yourself to me, and I shall guide you to the Prince of Wales."
The monarch capitulated, surrendering with a simple gesture, and that evening, found himself seated in the crimson embrace of his adversary's silk tent. The Black Prince, a gracious captor, attended to him personally before orchestrating his journey from Bordeaux to England. The Battle of Poitiers, an epochal clash, unfolded as a cataclysmic chapter, not only for France, but as an indelible mark etched across the canvas of the Middle Ages. In the aftermath, amid the delicate dance of peace negotiations, John's sojourn through captivity meandered across the regal landscapes of Savoy Palace, Windsor, Hertford, Somerton Castle in Lincolnshire, Berkhamsted Castle in Hertfordshire, and a brief sojourn at King John's Lodge, formerly known as Shortridge's, in East Sussex. Ultimately, the Tower of London embraced the defeated monarch, its austere walls bearing witness to the echo of lost battles and the relentless march of time. One must not disregard the pivotal role played by Thomas of Malmesbury's Eulogium Historiarum, a crucial font of historical knowledge concerning the intricate saga of the 100 Years' War. As an writer, I hold this chronicle in high esteem, not solely for its meticulous retrieval of historical data, but also for the enthralling narrative it unfolds. In stark contrast to many chroniclers who succumb to the burden of raw facts, the Malmesbury Chronicle stands as a rare anomaly. It spins a captivating yarn, demonstrating an artistic finesse that transcends the commonplace. In a domain where the aesthetic often succumbs to the relentless march of historical detail, Malmesbury's opus, alongside the literary contributions of Froissart and Thomas Walsingham, emerges not only as a wellspring of historical insight, but as a literary indulgence, an immersive experience akin to the pages of a spellbinding novel. The Eulogium is a world history from the creation to 1366. The majority of the work is taken from earlier writers, many of whom are named. For the period 1356 to 1366, the writer, probably Thomas, a monk of Malmesbury, provides an insight into the attitudes and opinions of his own time, and also into the historical sources available to a member of a large religious house. The work was obviously well regarded, as it survives in several manuscripts, two of which were continued by unknown authors, one to 1413 and one to 1490. For further reference, these continuations are included in a 3-volume edition by Frank Scott Hayden, 1822-1887. Volume 3, published in 1863, contains the second half of Book 5, covering the period from the Saxons to the 14th century, together with the Calendary Chronicle to 1364, the genealogies of the kings of England, the continuation to 1413, and an index. Here is the Battle of Poitiers and the Black Prince's 1356 campaign, through the lens of Thomas of Malmesbury, in my own revised translation, of Prior Turma ad Latinum of the United States Military Academy.
The noble prince embarked on his journey toward the realms of France, departing Bergerac on a Thursday, the 4th day of the August month. As he traversed the French countryside, he reached the domain of Périgord by the ensuing Saturday. In this land, Lord Bartholomew Burghersh, with his valiant retinue, triumphantly subdued 2 formidable walled towns, graciously bequeathed by the Lord of Marsan to the prince's disposal. The subsequent Sunday, marking the 7th day of August, witnessed the Lord Prince leading his formidable army towards a certain town, Périgueux, under the ecclesiastical jurisdiction of the Bishop of Périgord. A proclamation was issued against any violent plundering, contrary to the bishop's will. However, when the decree was communicated by the council of both the prince and the bishop, its efficacy waned. This encounter unfolded on the ensuing Monday during the progress along the road, and the Lord Prince encamped for the night in proximity to the formidable fortress named Ramfort. Come the following Tuesday, the Lord Prince, at the helm of his own division, advanced towards a town christened Brantôme, finding respite for the night within its confines. On the day consecrated to St. Lawrence, a Wednesday in the annals of August, the princely convoy charted its course across a formidable stream, framed by the silhouette of a mill house. Crowning the landscape, a robust castle and the hamlet of Quinsac overlooked this aqueous passage. Beneath the celestial canvas, the prince opted to linger through the night, ensconced within the silent vigil of the fortress. As the sun cast its golden glow upon the ensuing Thursday, the prince's journey unfolded in the quaint village of Merdun. Here, a bustling market of aquatic treasures materialized, a tableau where fish exchanged hands in myriad transactions. A tranquil respite was found as the prince chose to abide there, immersed in the serene embrace of the night. Friday unfurled its narrative, ushering the noble entourage to the town of Rochechouart. A confluence of history and destiny converged as the prince advanced through the annals of time, marking each step with an indelible imprint upon the landscape. Saturday's odyssey carried the prince through the venerable abbey of La Pérouse, where the river Vienne meandered in rhythmic harmony. Here, nobles and grandees were regaled along the riverbanks, a brief interlude in the relentless march of time. On the sacred Sunday, the 14th day of August, the prince traversed the flowing Vienne, unfurling his banners in proclamation as he graced the town called Lesseps. A staunch abbey, fortified and resolute, resisted the prince's advance for a considerable span of the day. In a final accord, the fortress acquiesced to the prince's will, granting clemency to its garrison, its church, and its vigilant guardians. Here, the prince chose to abide through the Holy Monday, the day of the Assumption of Blessed Mary. Come the ensuing Tuesday, August the 16th, the prince's sojourn led him to the town of Bellac, a dominion under the aegis of the Countess of Pembroke. Out of affection for this noble lady, the town was spared the ravages of fire. Wednesday's journey unveiled a fortified town named Le Dorat, encompassed by the protective embrace of a stronghold owned by Jacques de Bourbon. The ecclesiastical bastion within the town waged a protracted battle against the prince, yielding only at the eve of twilight. On this very day, the vanguard, valiant and unyielding, captured 2 mighty castles through daring assault, providing a sanctuary where the prince chose to repose through the night of the ensuing Thursday. Friday dawned upon the town of Lussac, a haven blessed with abundant piscine treasures. The night was spent in tranquil contemplation, yet on the morrow, the flames of destiny engulfed the town in their fiery dance. On the eve of Saturday, the journey led to the enchanting town of Saint-Benoît-du-Sault, adorned with an abbey where 2 nephews of Lord d'Albret had amassed a considerable fortune, totaling 14,000 écus. As the sun ascended on Sunday, the 21st day of August, the prince graced the town of Argenton, where a formidable castle stood sentinel below. It was here that he chose to sojourn through Monday. On this very day, the relentless pursuit of the prince's division culminated in the capture of a heavily fortified castle, a fleeting triumph etched in the annals of their passage. The ensuing Tuesday unveiled the splendid town of Châteauroux, resonating with the quaint charm of its French nomenclature. Continuing the journey, the prince arrived at another town, possibly Saint-Hymin, where the rearguard found solace throughout the night. Subsequently, they traversed another town, Diols, encircled by a protective moat, hosting the noble and robust abbey of Bourg-Dieu. A haven of pilgrimage, it held the revered remains of Saints Cosmas and Damien. The vanguard lingered through Wednesday, a day hallowed by the feast of Saint Bartholomew. Thursday witnessed the arrival of the prince at the formidable castle of Issoudun, belonging to the King of France. Here, the march halted, and the prince graced the castle with his presence through Friday and Saturday. On the sacred Sunday, the 28th day of August, the journey led to the impregnable castle known as La Ferté, once under the domain of the Viscount of Towers. Lords of Berkeley and Delaware tarried until the baggage had advanced. Progressing through an ancient town with weathered walls, Lury formerly marking the border of the Duchy of Guienne, the prince crossed the river Cher, demarcating the duchy from the Kingdom of France. The night unfolded in the embrace of the town of Vierzon. 3 days earlier, the Captal de Buch had left a swath of pillage in that region, leaving an abbey in ruins. Simultaneously, Sir John Chandos and Sir James de Audley assailed the town of Aubigny, reducing it to cinders and claiming it with force. On that eventful day, the 2 knights advanced with 200 men, encountering a Frenchman named Grismouton with 80 lances. The French resistance crumbled, with 18 knights and esquires captured, and the Grismouton was the first to flee. Monday, celebrated as the feast day of the beheading of St. John, marked the prince's arrival at Villefranche, perched above the river dividing the realms of France and the duchy. Simultaneously, the retainers of the Lord of Caumont apprehended 8 knights and esquires from the houses of Craon and Boucicaut. News reached the prince that the King of France sought battle, a prospect that pleased him immensely. However, as the prince approached within 16 leagues of the city of Orléans, he learned that the lords of Craon and Boucicaut were converging upon him with 601 lances and a formidable host. Undeterred, the prince led his forces courageously until reaching the walled town of Romorantin, where his adversaries found themselves ensnared. Tents were pitched, and for 3 days he awaited the unfolding drama above a ford by the village on the river Soudre, as Thursday cast its shadow. On the following Wednesday, the prince issued forth the command to assail the town, and so it was executed with formidable might. The defenders, entrenched within the castle, resisted with unwavering valour, for a multitude of men-at-arms fortified their position. Adjacent to this stronghold, another formidable edifice, known as Les Dongunes, stood at a stone's throw away, raining havoc upon the prince's forces. Even after the town succumbed to capture, the Dongunes, fashioned in the semblance of a towering structure, continued its tenacious resistance. In the throes of battle, a young yet noble knight named d'Albret and a gallant esquire, companion to the Captal de Buch, met their tragic demise. On the ensuing Thursday, the construction of 3 siege engines commenced, aiming to dismantle the defiant tower. The Earl of Suffolk crafted one, Bartholomew Burhurst fashioned another, and a noble from Gascony contributed the third. Friday and Saturday bore witness to the tower's engulfment in flames, with the defenders unable to quell the inferno adequately, given the scarcity of wine and water at their disposal. Throughout the day, peace negotiations and the surrender of the tower were deliberated, ultimately culminating in the collective submission to the prince's mercy. The subsequent Sunday, the 4th day of September, heralded a respite as the prince directed his men to ready themselves and their equipment. On the ensuing Monday, the prince ventured into the domain of the Count of Bissey and Bourguiloun, possibly denoting Auxerre and Burgundy. Tuesday saw the prince arriving at a castle within the county of Blois, perched alongside the Cher River. Wednesday unfolded as the prince reached Aumont, modern Montlouis, on the Loire near Tours in Touraine, a city both noble and resplendent. There he lingered through Thursday, Friday and Saturday, with his men savouring the joys of pleasant days. Come Sunday, the 11th day of September, the prince set his army in motion, safely navigating the treacherous river Indre in the morning. Advancing further, he reached the town of Montbazon, where he encamped in proximity to a formidable castle. The subsequent Monday witnessed the arrival of the Cardinal of Périgord, accompanied by an archbishop, several bishops, and other distinguished figures advocating piety and mercy in their preachings to the prince. Concurrently, rumours circulated that the Dauphin, with a formidable force, was positioned at Tours and Touraine. Additionally, whispers suggested that the King of France, leading his own division, aimed to engage the prince in battle on the forthcoming Wednesday. On the subsequent Tuesday, the prince traversed the town of Saint-Maur under the rule of the Lord of Craon and spent the night in a village named La Haye, modern Descartes, situated above the Creuse River's bank. At this juncture, tidings reached the prince that the King of France sought to outpace them, fueled by concerns that the prince might be fleeing, having detected the French army. Wednesday saw the prince's arrival at Châtellerault, an edifice boasting a grand town situated along the Vienne River. He lingered there through the days of Thursday and Friday. News then reached him that the King of France had lodged on Saturday night along the same river in a small town called Chauvigny. Consequently, the prince proclaimed an urgent directive for all pack animals, carts, and provisions carriers to cross the bridge that very night. This precaution aimed to prevent impediments to the army's movement the next day as it hurried to confront the impending enemy. The command was swiftly executed. On Saturday, with the first light of dawn, the prince swiftly advanced with utmost speed toward the French forces. He crossed the river flowing to Poitiers, learning that a contingent of the French was en route to the city and that a substantial host had already passed through the vicinity. Urgently, the prince pressed forward, deviating from the Chauvigny to Poitiers route, opting instead for a cross-country trajectory aimed at confronting his adversaries, regardless of his own baggage. As the prince hurried on this path, his scouts encountered around 200 men-at-arms from the French rearguard at the fringe of an expansive forest. Engaging them valiantly, the scouts routed the French, who fled through the woods, dispersed and ignominiously defeated. Yet the English refrained from pursuing the fleeing men, wary of potential reinforcement from the formidable vanguard or middle division of the French. Observing the French reluctance to engage, the prince chose to lodge himself in the woodland where the skirmish occurred. However, the night brought hardship to his army due to a scarcity of water. Notably, in that skirmish, 2 counts, specifically one from Auxerre and another, were captured, and a considerable number of knights and men-at-arms met their demise. On Sunday, the 18th day of September, in the early morning, the prince advanced an additional 2 miles into the territory, heading in the direction of Poitiers. Here, he received intelligence that the King of France awaited him on level ground, with his division strategically arrayed for battle. As the prince hastened along the road to confront his foes, he encountered Cardinal Périgord, who, with outstretched hands and arms, implored the prince to halt briefly, expressing a desire to present his purpose. The prince, resolute in his urgency, replied, "Speak your proposition swiftly, for now is not the time for preaching. Rather, it is time for battle." The cardinal entreated the prince to show mercy to humankind and refrain from shedding Christian blood, suggesting that the blood of pagans be spilled instead. Negotiations ensued between them, and the prince, influenced by the cardinal's entreaties and promises, agreed to engage in peace talks. 11 representatives from each side, with the cardinal as mediator, were designated to negotiate for the restoration of peace between the prince and the king. Throughout the day, discussions revolved around the prince's petitions and the potential conclusion of peace, but alas, no agreement materialized. The French deliberately prolonged the talks, aiming to augment their forces. Indeed, on the same day dedicated to peace negotiations, 1,500 men-at-arms and a multitude of foot soldiers came to reinforce the King of France. Witnessing the insincere and tepid efforts of the other French representatives, who perceived the continuous growth of their army, the prince, discerning their tactics, ordered an end to the negotiations and rested for the night. Monday, the 19th day of September, brought the return of the cardinal at dawn, eager to resume discussions for peace. However, recognizing the strengthening of the enemy force as the day progressed, the prince chose to forgo further negotiations that might disadvantage him. Groups of troops, numbering 2, 3, or 500 men, consistently joined the French division, intensifying the prince's concern. Aware of the cardinal's inclination toward the King of France, the prince tersely informed him that he was no longer willing to entertain his deceptive words. Thus, with a benediction to the prince, the cardinal retreated to whence he came. The prince, however, conferred with his own men on the route to proceed towards their adversaries. A dense wood lay between them, dotted with ditches and crowned by a lofty, thorny hedge, seemingly impenetrable, save for a solitary access point. Intelligence suggested the presence of the French division within the woods. The sole gateway, known in English as a leap gate, allowed the entrance of 5 men-at-arms standing upright and no more. Urged by his spurs, the prince spurred his destrier to leap over the pit and hedge, leading the charge. Sir Robert de Bradeston, the first to enter the gate, was said to have been struck down in that assault, and following him, Lord Maurice of Berkeley, son of Lord Thomas of Berkeley, entered and suffered grievous wounds. After the tumultuous battle within the wooded enclosure or hedged fields, divine providence favoured the English, with the French subdued, killed, captured, or put to flight. As the great army of the French appeared, divided into 3 substantial battle lines, each with its wings, the sight struck terror into many of the English, and understandably so. Observing these immense formations of men, the prince rallied his troops with resolute words, asserting that the strength in war lies not merely in men and arms, but, above all, in unwavering trust in God. He dismounted from his destrier, and his example was followed by others. The French, too, sent their horses to the rear to facilitate a swift pursuit of the English. Charging simultaneously from both sides, a vast and formidable carnage unfolded, unparalleled in duration compared to other conflicts. In previous engagements, the outcome was often discerned within a few arrow volleys, but in this instance, a single archer unleashed 100 arrows, and still neither side yielded. It was an unprecedented perseverance in the annals of wars and heroic tales. Some accounts, though not asserted as truth, claimed that the French witnessed an armoured mounted knight soaring through the air, engaged in combat against them. Once again, victory by divine will smiled upon the English. King Jean of France was captured, along with his young son Philippe, a boy but armed nonetheless. 14 counts, 21 barons and bannerets were also taken captive. 22 bannerets met their demise. 3 sons of the king's brother, the Bishop of Langres, and 57 bannerets fled the battlefield. Moreover, 1,400 knights were captured, totaling 3 Toussaint's men-at-arms. The casualties among the foot soldiers were not enumerated. Thus concludes the Battle of Poitiers.
And so unfolds the epilogue of today's narrative, a contemplative denouement resonating with the echoes of ages. In the intricate dance between honour and the regal insignia, one often finds the paradoxical necessity of forsaking the crown, a decision that may paint one as a buffoon, or, more grievously, as a traitor in the eyes of loyal subjects. Life, it seems, harbours no alchemic elixir, and this sobering truth spares neither the lofty nor the humble in this vast realm. Here, destiny has cast us as equals, weaving the common threads of our human fate into a shared tapestry. I trust that the expedition we embarked upon today was as compelling as the clash of arms on that momentous day in 1356. As we bid a fond adieu to this chapter of Winning Paths, I extend my deepest gratitude to each of you, the audacious explorers venturing through the corridors of history. Your unwavering curiosity and fervent dedication to the annals of archery history render this podcast a truly enriching odyssey. Should the echoes of our adventure find resonance within you, do ensure to join us on Spotify and share the tales among your fellow archers and history aficionados. Recall, the past is not merely a linear chronicle. It conceals a treasury of lessons waiting to be unearthed, a trove of wisdom and reflection. Until our paths converge in the unfolding chapters of our next expedition, wherever the whims of destiny may guide us.